I built a life of quiet certainty. Then, a touch reshaped everything.
Some masterpieces hide a darker artist.
I used to think my life in Boise was a quiet masterpiece, a well-tended garden of routine and contentment. I was Arthur, a history teacher for over 2 decades, a man who found solace in the past and joy in seeing young minds light up with curiosity. At 52, I had a comfortable home, a reliable car, and a circle of friends who understood my dry wit and my love for classic rock. My life was predictable, yes, but it was mine, and I was proud of the quiet stability I'd built. Then Belinda walked into it, a splash of vibrant color in my muted world. She was 10 years my junior, a local artist with a charming smile and eyes that seemed to see right into my soul. We met at a gallery opening, an unusual excursion for me, prompted by a colleague, and she made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. Our courtship was a whirlwind of late-night talks, shared dreams, and her infectious enthusiasm. I was utterly captivated. When we married, I felt a surge of hope, a belief that this woman would bring a new, exciting chapter to my well-ordered book. I wanted to be the best version of myself for her. The changes started subtly, like a slow erosion. At first, her suggestions felt helpful, even loving. My lesson plans, she'd gently muse, were perhaps a little too focused on dates and names, Arthur. Don't you think the kids would connect more with the human stories? She'd offer to help me pick out new shirts, claiming my current wardrobe was charming, darling, but perhaps a tad academic for a man with such hidden depths. I bought new clothes. I tried to inject more narrative into my lectures. I wanted to please her, to prove I could be the dynamic, interesting man she clearly believed me to be. She was always so sweet about it, her criticisms wrapped in a soft blanket of concern. "You're so sensitive, Arthur," she'd say, stroking my arm. "I just want you to shine." I absorbed her words, eager to believe she was polishing a rough gem, not grinding it down. My friends, my old friends, started to feel a bit distant. Invitations would go unanswered. Plans would mysteriously fall through. Belinda always had an explanation. "Oh, Michael called, but he sounded so negative, Arthur. I didn't want him to bring you down. You're so impressionable, darling." Or, "Laura emailed about that concert, but you looked so tired. I told her you needed a quiet evening with me." I began to spend more time alone with Belinda, convinced she truly was my greatest champion, the only one who truly understood how sensitive I was, how much I needed her protection from the world's harsh realities. My old life, once so stable, began to feel like a distant shore, fading into the mist. I was drifting, and Belinda was my only anchor. The suggestions became less gentle, more pointed. My teaching style wasn't just too dry. It was uninspired, a snooze fest for teenagers. My love for classic rock wasn't just a little dated. It was, honestly, a little sad for a man your age, Arthur. Don't you want to explore something more vibrant, more now? She'd sigh dramatically when I put on Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd, making me feel like a relic, clinging to a past that no one else cared about. I started to turn off the music or listen with headphones, hidden away. My once sturdy self-worth, which had been built on years of positive student feedback and the respect of my colleagues, was slowly but surely crumbling. I started second-guessing every decision, every word I spoke, every lesson plan I devised. Belinda, my self-appointed editor, was always there to point out the flaws, the areas where I could improve. Her voice, once so melodious, had become a constant, low hum of critique in the back of my mind. I found myself apologizing for things I hadn't even realized were wrong. I started dressing exactly as she wanted, speaking less about my passions, trying to mold myself into the image of the man she seemed to desire. But no matter how hard I tried, I never quite measured up. The goalpost kept moving. I became increasingly anxious, a knot of nerves residing permanently in my stomach. The confident teacher I once was, the man who could command a room with a compelling story, was replaced by someone hesitant, withdrawn, and perpetually worried about disappointing Belinda. I felt like a puppet, my strings being subtly, expertly manipulated, and I was too desperate to believe in her vision of a better me to even notice the ropes tightening. My friends called less, perhaps because Belinda was so effective at intercepting, Or perhaps because I was becoming a different person, one they barely recognized. I missed them deeply, but I felt too ashamed to reach out, convinced they'd only confirm what Belinda had been telling me all along, that I was inadequate, boring, and fundamentally uninteresting without her constant, vigilant guidance. The silence around me grew, broken only by Belinda's soft, insidious voice, echoing my own growing self-doubt. I was living in a fog, a constant state of low-grade dread. Every morning, I'd wake up already feeling the weight of the day, wondering what new inadequacy Belinda would uncover, what new aspect of my personality needed refinement. My classroom, once a sanctuary, now felt like another stage where I was performing, trying to prove my worth not just to my students, but to an invisible critic. I found myself avoiding eye contact with colleagues, fearing their judgment, convinced they could see the failure I felt festering inside me. My lessons, though still meticulously prepared, lacked the spark they once had. I'd catch myself mid-sentence, wondering if my tone was too dry, if my anecdote was a little sad for a man my age. The joy of teaching, the very thing that had anchored me for so long, was slowly being sucked dry. Belinda, meanwhile, maintained her facade of the loving, supportive wife. To outsiders, she was the charming artist, so devoted to her sensitive husband. She'd bring me tea when I worked late, offer back rubs, and then, in the same breath, subtly undermine me. "You're so stressed, darling," she'd coo. "It's because you care too much. You need to learn to let go, to not take things so seriously. Perhaps your students respond to that anxiety." Her words were like tiny cuts, each one insignificant on its own, but together, they bled me dry. I felt trapped in a self-fulfilling prophecy. I believed I was inadequate, and therefore, I became inadequate. My once vibrant inner world had shrunk to a tiny, anxious space where Belinda's opinions reigned supreme, and my own voice was a whisper I could barely hear anymore. The silence of my isolated life was deafening, and I yearned for a way out, but I didn't even know what I was looking for. The parent-teacher conference that afternoon was a blur of polite smiles and concerned nods until Mrs. Davies, a seasoned English teacher with a kind, perceptive gaze, caught my eye. She was usually a whirlwind of energy, but her demeanor was unusually subdued as she quietly pulled me aside in the deserted hallway between sessions. "Arthur," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Can we talk for a moment? It's about some emails." My stomach instantly plummeted. Emails. I braced myself for a parent complaint about a grade, or perhaps a student expressing boredom, confirming all of Belinda's constant criticisms. But what Mrs. Davies revealed was far more insidious. She spoke of a series of anonymous, vaguely critical emails sent to the principal and several parents over the past few months. They detailed my lackluster performance, my uninspired teaching, even suggesting my outdated methods were holding students back. The principal, she explained, had done some digging. The emails, all sent during school hours, times when I was demonstrably in my classroom, had been traced to an IP address linked to my home network. The content mirrored Belinda's private criticisms exactly, word for word, phrase for phrase. It was like a cold, hard slap to the face. The fog lifted, and in its place was a sickening clarity. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying precision. The intercepted invitations, the constant chipping away, the isolation, the anonymous attacks. It wasn't just my self-worth she was sabotaging. It was my career, my entire life. I drove home in a daze, the steering wheel slick in my clammy hands. The beautiful Boise landscape, usually a source of calm, now seemed to mock me with its indifferent beauty. Belinda was in the living room, sketching, a picture of serene domesticity. The sight of her, so calm, so seemingly innocent, ignited a cold fury in me. I walked straight to her, my voice trembling but firm. "Belinda," I began, "we need to talk about some emails." She looked up, her expression a practiced blend of concern and curiosity. "Emails, darling? What about them?" I laid out what Mrs. Davies had told me, the anonymous criticisms, the IP address, the timing. Her face, for a split second, flickered. Then, the tears came, instant and convincing. "Oh, Arthur," she sobbed, throwing her arms around me. "I was only trying to help you, to motivate you, to make you see your potential. I saw how much you were struggling, how unhappy you were, and I wanted to light a fire under you. Her voice was laced with what sounded like genuine distress, and for a terrifying moment, I almost believed her, almost fell back into her web of manipulation. But then, I remembered the cold, hard facts. Belinda, I said, pulling away, my voice gaining strength. The principal traced the IP address to our home network, and sending anonymous, defamatory emails, even with good intentions, has legal implications. That was when her mask finally slipped. The tears vanished. Her eyes, usually so warm and inviting, turned to chips of ice. A cold, calculating anger contorted her face, a look I'd never seen before, a flash of pure, unadulterated malice. You unrate. Full fool, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. I was trying to make something of you. You were so pathetic, so utterly boring. The true Belinda, the one who had been hiding beneath layers of charm and feigned concern, had finally revealed herself. And in that moment, I knew my life, as I had known it, was irrevocably over. But paradoxically, I felt a strange, liberating rush of air fill my lungs, a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. The next few weeks were a painful blur. The betrayal was a festering wound, but the clarity it brought was a powerful antiseptic. There was no going back. I filed for divorce the very next day, presenting the evidence of the emails and Belinda's confession to my lawyer. He listened intently, his expression grave, and advised me on the potential for a restraining order given her manipulative behavior and the nature of her attacks. The divorce was messy, as expected. Belinda, stripped of her facade, fought back with a vengeful ferocity, attempting to discredit me, to portray herself as the victim. But the evidence was clear, and my lawyer was a bulldog. As the legal proceedings ground on, I found solace in the most unexpected places. In the quiet hum of my old record player, the familiar strains of classic rock a balm to my raw nerves. In the tentative reconnection with my old friends. Michael, Laura, and others I'd pushed away, or Belinda had pushed away from me, responded with an outpouring of concern and genuine affection. There were apologies exchanged, tears shed, and a slow, cautious rebuilding of trust. They had seen something was wrong, they admitted, but Belinda had been so convincing, so charming, they hadn't known how to break through. Their forgiveness, their simple presence, was like water to a parched desert. I rediscovered my passion for history, not just in the classroom, but in my own life. I started reading for pleasure again, devouring biographies and historical accounts, feeling the spark of curiosity reignite within me. The anxieties that had plagued me for so long began to recede, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. I realized Belinda's motivation wasn't to better me, but to control me, to diminish me. She fed off my insecurity because, beneath her artistic pretensions, she herself felt a profound, artistic emptiness, envious of my genuine, if quiet, fulfillment. She couldn't create lasting value, so she sought to destroy it in others. The divorce eventually finalized, leaving me bruised but whole. Belinda faded from my life, a bitter memory, a lesson learned with excruciating pain. The legal implications of her actions were handled, though I chose not to pursue the most severe charges, simply wanting her out of my life permanently. The path to healing wasn't linear. There were days when the ghost of her criticisms would whisper in my ear, days when the isolation still felt heavy. But I had my friends back, my colleagues, and most importantly, I had myself. I started an after-school history club, something I'd always dreamed of, but Belinda had dismissed as too niche, too boring. To my surprise, it was a resounding success. Students flocked to it, eager to delve into forgotten stories and discuss the echoes of the past and the present. It was a tangible sign of my renewal, a small triumph that meant the world. I understood now that Belinda's constant criticism was merely a projection of her own inability to create lasting value, her own profound emptiness. She tried to tear me down because she couldn't build herself up. That realization, though born of immense pain, was incredibly freeing. I emerged from the wreckage not just healed, but renewed. My teaching regained its vigor, infused with a newfound pride and confidence that Belinda had tried so desperately to extinguish. My students responded to it, my colleagues respected it, and I, Arthur, finally loved it again. My life was still a quiet masterpiece, but now it was truly mine, painted with colors of resilience, wisdom, and a deep, abiding gratitude for the quiet, fulfilling life I had almost let someone else sabotage. The scars remained, a reminder of what I had endured, but they were no longer open wounds. They were part of my story, a testament to the strength I didn't know I possessed, and a bittersweet marker on the journey back to myself.